If you're somebody who has been hearing that AI is changing a lot of productivity for these developers are more productive, they are able to churn out more code, more features, a lot of these things, and you're wondering like, how does that even happen? Like, what are these guys actually doing that led to this increased productivity? Well, the answer is that I really don't know, but I have my own set of tips, 10 tips to be precise, that I want to share in this video, which are tested by me as a developer because I work as one of the developers on Fermion product alongside being the CEO, and I do this a lot in my day-to-day activities and day-to-day work in order to fix things, in order to build things, in order to work with my team and so on. So without a doubt, these AI tools have changed the game. They have made a lot of these things possible which were not possible before. For example, you can ask some junior developer to take on some level of senior task to complete it, even if that person has not had any experience with that feature implementation, because you can learn on the job much better, right? This was possible earlier, but the learning was never contextual. So you will have to go to Google, you'll have to go to Stack Overflow, and you'll have to learn about something parallelly while making or maintaining the context of your code base in a separate mind thread, right? What these AI tools allow you to do is debug and implement and chat with your code base directly with all the information of the internet. That is what LLMs are, right? They're trained on public data, but you can use that information and understanding to make sense of the code base that you're working with as well. So let's start with how do you actually make the best use of these AI tools, AI subscriptions, and what do you do? Well, my first tip, which is the most important tip that I figured out, is that you must have 2 subscriptions of some of these AI tools when you are trying to code. And these could be 2 low-end subscriptions, right? So $20 a month, 2 plans. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in my case, for example, what this means is that the first subscription that you have to have, for example, is like a Cursor or a VS Code GitHub Copilot subscription. This would allow you to have in editor, in IDE, just the IDE changes directly happening. And the second subscription that I personally have is Claude Code. Now this you can replace with anything. So you can even have Codex and Claude Code. You can have, let's say, GitHub Copilot and Claude Code. You can have open code with some third-party API, and you can have Claude Code, for example. But the point is that you must have at least two softwares at any point. Now, the reason for this is, number one, is that the usage numbers for these softwares or these AI can hit its limits, right? So it's possible that if you're working all the time with Claude Code, it's possible that you exhaust its UI usage, and then you have one of the 2 options. Either you upgrade to a $100 month plan, which you might not need all the time, right? So for example, in my case, I upgraded to $100 month Claude Code at some point, but I found myself that I'm not using it as much as, the plan gives me the usage, except for a very few times, a very few days. In that case, you can obviously and always switch back to your second subscription, whether that's OpenAI's Codex, Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, or Cursor. The second reason is that a lot of these times, although very rarely now, you would also find once in a while that these models or these companies are down, right? So for example, that has not happened with Cursor, by the way, but if you look at Claude, for example, or Anthropic or OpenAI, or these companies which are actually also model providers, sometimes you will see that their companies, the model performance is down, or maybe their API endpoints are down itself. Something is not working. So in that case, you might want to have like a fallback or a backup. And you might think that, okay, I can just purchase the second thing at that time itself. But the thing is that you also want to be accustomed. You should be able to use it right away. As you keep on using these 2 subscriptions, you'll get used to both these products. My second tip is to not use AI tools generally for issues that are taking less than 3 to 4 minutes of your time. Now, the reason I say this is because these AI tools like Claude Code and Cursor and GitHub Copilot are best suited when you are putting them into planning mode, when they are able to traverse the code base, they're able to figure out what to do in whatever specific manner you wanted to do it, make edits to multiple files, like in an agentic mode. That is where it helps you save time. If you are doing very small issues of 3-4 minutes with these AI tools, it is possible that you end up spending more time completing that issue than it would have taken you on your own. And that is what you want to minimize as the first thing, right? The first thing is that you want to minimize the time spent. The second is obviously the brain capacity. So you don't want to think a lot where AI can do a bunch of thinking for you, so that you can focus that brain cycles or CPU cycles of your own head into some other task, into some other things. So for this, what I recommend is that you should, first of all, whatever work you are doing in in whatever company, you should be able to figure out that, okay, this issue is taking me 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes of time. Okay, maybe that issue will take me like a half an hour or 1 hour of planning and then completing it. You should be a good developer yourself in order to make the best use of these agents and AI tools. Because if you don't do that, then what will happen is that you will end up wasting a lot more time fixing issues that you can just fix on your own, which you will just delegate to these AI agents. Now, the next set of tips that I have, I will do them probably together by also just implementing something as a feature or as an issue, as a ticket that we have for Fermion. By the way, if you don't know about Fermion, it's a AI ready cloud for your modern edtech businesses. We work with a lot of educational institutes like boot camps, company owners, internal companies using LMS as Fermion. So Fermion is like a full platform for running your online education system, whether that's courses, contests, assessments, exam, live classes, video streaming, anything, you name it. And everything is available over API as well programmatically. So you can build your own either managed LMS on your own, or you can just embed whatever parts you like, coding labs, live classes, video streaming, all of that. So coming to this, we get a lot of these inbound requirements and inbound requests from customers that we work with. One of them, for example, is creating public invites for contests, right? So I'll try to show you how I work generally with things like these. So to set context a little bit better in case of what this issue is exactly, is one of our clients has requested that when they create a contest, for example, a contest is basically a timed exam, timed assessment, right? If you have given any sort of exam, you know, like there is an interface where you go full screen, there are questions, there are things that you can do, and you know, there is a timer, there is proctoring, all of that. So everything exists inside Fermion, which you're able to complete, which you're able to do on your own by configuring the contest, how the proctoring, how everything works. But one thing that is missing right now as a feature request which has been raised is that one of our clients would like to have the option to let students that are not enrolled in the school to be able to take part in contest, right? So right now the behavior is that once you create your own landing page for a specific contest, you must register in order to access the contest, which makes sense at the time when we were creating it. But there are some scenarios where you would want to have like a truly public contest where somebody can just enter their name, email and phone number, and that's it. They don't have to register, they don't have to verify the OTP, email address, whatever. So in this case, what I would do is, this is a relatively larger issue, right? So it'll take me probably like 15 or 10 minutes of planning if I'm doing it on my own, like how or what DB schema changes or whatever needs to be done, and the rest of like maybe 30 to 40 minutes of implementing it on back end and front end. So these things, how you have to do is, obviously you have to give it to a system or an agent like, you know, Cloud Code, for example. So in this case, first of all, I'll just switch my branch to the issue ID that we have, and then I'll launch an instance of Cloud Code. Now over here, my tip number 3 to begin with is always create a plan first, right? So in Cloud Code, you can press shift and tab to cycle, and most of these systems have this plan mode now, right? Cursor has that, Cloud Code has that, I think Codex also has this. Plan mode is basically something where the agent spends a bunch of its time researching about the problem first instead of just directly going and making changes. And this is super critical in terms of quality, because you don't want the agent to start working on something before it has told you what it wants to do. Now this brings me to my next tip, which is tip number 4, is when you are inside the plan mode, you have to do all of your effort to create a very detailed context, right? Because the first context that you give it would affect the plan a lot, like how it's coming up with the ideas, the issues, what it needs to do. If you wanted to refer to some Git commits in the past to see like how things were happening, do that and so on. So yeah, so let's start with this. So I'll probably just say that, okay, issue is that we need to create public invites for contest as well. And then I'll have like, for example, a description which will go in detail of what needs to be done. So let me explain it to Cloud Code just like I'm explaining it to you. So here I have it. I'll just explain what I have done here. So I have said that we need to create public invites for contests. And in the description, I wrote about that there's a feature called contest on Fermion, which I just also showed you, which allows instructors to conduct timed and proctored exams. So far, in order to access published contests, a student has to create an account first, right? So let me actually show you, because obviously you guys are humans, so you will understand it faster and better than AI, although that's doubtful for a lot of humans now, I'm assuming. Let me just allow retries for now. And now if I take this URL and if I put it over here in an incognito tab, you will see that it asks me to, go to the login page. So I can even like help it out, even though I know Claude can figure it out on its own, but I can just say it that on front end, you will be able to find this by searching the string, this one, right? So I'm giving it all the information that it will need. The students need to go to the login page. They'll have to create an account. They'll have to register, all sorts of friction. What we want to do is that probably if somebody has checked on like allow anonymous attempts, instead of going to the login page, they will see like a form here itself where they'll just enter their name, email, all of that, and it will be done, right? So I explained it further that if the option is toggled on for anonymous access, instead of this, it should just have a form here like we do on public live events. Now, another tip which is very important is that you have to give it context of something which has already been implemented. These tools work really well if they're able to study an implementation which already exists in the code base, and then they can go ahead and just copy that implementation or at least the ideas from it, right? Now you see that I've put it into plan mode. I have written a very detailed context of the issue, and then one more important thing which I had forgot to mention, but it is actually going to be our tip number 5, is that you have to operate them into asynchronous mode. Otherwise, there is no point of using an AI system if you are just manually approving everything. This might be a little risky and this might be not applicable to everyone, but I don't know if you observed this, but for the very first time also when I started Claude, I started it with dangerously skip permissions. If you don't do this, then what will happen is that every single time it wants to run a command like getting git history, or if it wants to get something, it would ask for your permission, right? If it wants to make an edit to the file, it will ask for your permission. Now there are pros and cons for both. I do not recommend that you just blindly follow this tip. It is, however, recommended if you are able to tune your repository in such a way that you are able to do it hands off. That is how I prefer, because otherwise you will be stuck with permission hell all the time. This brings me to my next tip, which is also make sure that for systems like Claude, for example, you are adding directories, right? So in Fermion's case, this Fermion platform that we have, it's basically a big monorepo. There are two monorepos here. The first is a backend, the second is a frontend, right? So you must add these directories inside Claude Code so that it's able to make changes on frontend and backend both simultaneously. You can see that this is an issue which will not be just fixed by making changes to frontend or backend. It needs to do both the changes, right? So you need to do this in a way where it is able to do these changes at both places. Cursor supports it through workspaces, so you have to create a workspace and then whatever agent mode or whatever you're using will be able to do that. In Cursor, for example, you can use this plan mode, which is equivalent to how Claude Code's plan mode works. All right, so once it's done, I'll just let it work and I'll just do something else. This also brings me to my next tip, which is when your agent is working on a problem, that means that you must start working on something else. I mean, it could be like you could be just doing a fun activity, playing a game or whatever, but don't watch this screen. There is basically no use of watching this screen. Tools like Claude Code, for example, have built-in notifications. If it needs your attention, it will send you a notification on top left on your Mac or Windows or whatever that it needs your attention, right? There is absolutely no need to watch the screen continuously, because it might be fascinating for you to figure out like, hey, what it's doing, what it's running. Do it for the first time, second time, but then forget about it. Just put it in the background and go back to doing something else. Maybe another issue that you are picking up, maybe something else that you want to plan out, maybe like even writing prompt for the next issue, like a detailed prompt that I mentioned about. But don't watch this screen. That's utter waste of your time, and that is what will make it possible for doing a 30-minute issue in 1 hour, right? Because obviously the model might implement it wrong, and then you might have wasted the time watching it instead of doing something else tangentially. The other couple of tips that I have is code review these changes extremely carefully. And the way I like to do it is I'll just probably have a cursor instance like we talked about, and I'll keep the source control tab opened up, right? So it'll start showing me changes of whatever even agents like Claude Code are doing. Cursor internally has very well built-in diff engine, right? Where it can just show you inline what it's doing. But for systems like Claude Code, that does not exist. Claude will show you the differences that it's doing in the CLI itself, but I don't feel that's very comfortable. So obviously Claude right now is in planning mode, so it will not make any changes as such. It is in research mode. Once it's done the changes, you would want to have a cursor or some sort of diff engine open up, and you want to review exactly what it's doing. The 9th tip that I have is that you should also use these AI tools for code review. Now, obviously there are dedicated tools as well, like Graphite and, you know, a Bugbot from Cursor and so on. But I've seen like you can basically make use of Claude and these generic tools as well. What you have to do is that you just have to ask it that, hey, can you code review the last git commit I made, right? And if you put it into plan mode on, again, like you don't want it to make any changes, if you do this, this is good because now you can run like two agents parallelly. One is doing like some sort of code review for your last time, the other one is actually implementing a feature and so on, right? And if it's in plan mode, you know for a fact that they can't just go ahead and start making changes, right? So that's good. Use these AI tools for code review as well, and especially independently, right? So if you are using one agent for doing something, then use the other one for making the code review. Otherwise, you might just be polluting the context from the first agent itself, which might result in bugs creeping in. And last and final suggestion that I have is that you have to realize when to not use AI. There are some features, there are some code paths, some code branches which should not be touched by AI, or even if AI is touching them, they have to be very well studied. Like there are some critical systems in every production app which are very, very sensitive, right? So you don't want to make any error over there. It could be like a proxy system which is handling like most of your production traffic. It could be like some sort of configuration for load balancer. It could be something which is very close to DNS. I'm talking about advanced stuff here, right? I'm not talking about like making a button's color change. Who cares if a button's color is broken on production? But yes, people will be really upset if you are in a multi-tenant system and you mess up with some configuration, right? So those things and those issues should not be done with AI, especially if they are very few lines of code changes, and especially if you don't really know about them in the first place, right? So I strongly feel as a developer, you should only use AI for features that you are very confident about implementing yourself. If you're not confident about that feature, you can ask AI for, implementing a proof of concept or doing something, but then go back and study its implementation, learn from it. It's the same principle we have been talking about for the last 20 years since Stack Overflow came into picture. The code that you're copying, earlier we used to say that the code you're copying from Stack Overflow, you should understand it. Just don't put arbitrary code in your code base. Now the saying is that the code that the AI is writing, you should be able to understand it. Even though it would be much more contextual to your change, it's still the same thing. You are still somewhat sort of adding untrusted code in your existing code base, which can break. And I have unlimited examples of these things on Fermion's code base because we also use AI a lot for features. And there are things that go wrong all the time with these AI systems because they don't understand the complexity and the scope of the work that needs to be done. So the last and the final tip is that do not use AI for very, very critical changes that you know are very sensitive. They're very important for production workload. Do a human touch there, right? You need a human supervision at the very minimum, and at the very, ideally you should be doing it by your hands. And that is what will make you a senior engineer. So that's all for this one. I hope you liked it. And if you did, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I will see you in the next video very soon.